What if I told you that the 1,970 seconds, the golden decade of rock, was also a graveyard of broken dreams? Behind the flashing lights, screaming fans, and stadium-shaking anthems, fame came with a price far heavier than anyone expected. Some of the brightest stars burned out before their time, consumed not just by excess, but by relentless pressure, grueling schedules, and a culture that celebrated self-destruction as rock and roll. This isn't just a list of tragic endings, it's a lesson in how fame without balance can crush even the strongest talents. From the haunting mystery of Jim Morrison in Paris to the heartbreaking downfall of Elvis Presley, each story reminds us that success without health, grounding, and support can turn into a silent enemy. By the end of this video, you'll never see these legends the same way again. Stay with us, and if you love exploring the untold side of music history, consider subscribing for more stories like this. He was the ultimate guitar revolutionary, a man who could make 6 strings sound like thunder, fire, and poetry all at once. Jimi Hendrix wasn't just a musician, he was a cultural force redefining rock with explosive performances at Woodstock and Monterey. On stage, he seemed invincible, lost in the flames of his own genius. But behind the spotlight, Jimi was caught in a storm that not even his unmatched talent could silence. The pressure was relentless. Record labels pushed for more albums, audiences demanded ever louder spectacles, and fame left him little space for peace. Like many artists of the 1,970 seconds, he turned to substances seeking escape from the grind. In September 1970, just 27 years old, Hendrix was found in a London flat after a tragic night. The official cause was asphyxiation while under the influence of barbiturates. His death sent shockwaves through the music world forever, etching his name into the infamous 27 Club. But beyond the tragedy lies a sobering lesson. Hendrix's story reminds us that innovation and brilliance cannot thrive without care for one's health and mind. Even legends need rest, balance, and support system. The myth of the tortured artist, often glamorized in rock culture, hides the harsh truth. Fame without limits can devour the very gift that made someone special. So while we celebrate his music, we should also reflect on the warning his story carries. Jimi Hendrix showed us what greatness looks like, but also how fragile it can be. But if you think Hendrix's downfall was tragic, wait until you hear about Janis Joplin. They called her the queen of rock and roll, a powerhouse voice that could rip through the soul with raw emotion. Janis Joplin was unlike anyone else, wild, electric, vulnerable. On stage, she poured her entire being into every note, leaving audiences breathless. But when the lights dimmed, the applause faded, and she was left alone in her hotel room, the silence felt unbearable. Janis struggled deeply with loneliness and self-doubt. While her public image was fierce and unbreakable, privately, she wrestled with insecurity, heartbreak, and the crushing weight of living up to her own legend. Like so many stars of the 1,970 seconds, she sought refuge in substances, temporary relief that only tightened its grip over time. On the 4th of October 1970, Janis was found lifeless in her Los Angeles hotel. She was just 27, the same haunting age as Hendrix. The official cause, a heroin overdose, a brutal reminder that no voice, no matter how powerful, is immune to vulnerability. Her story carries a lesson far beyond the stage. Janis shows us how dangerous it is to confuse fame with fulfillment. Stardom may look glamorous, but it cannot replace true connection, self-care, or emotional support. She sang the truth of human pain, but she didn't always have the tools to heal her own. For young dreamers, her life is both inspiration and warning. Greatness without balance can become a trap. Celebrate her courage, her raw honesty, but remember the cost. And if you think Janis's fall was heartbreaking, wait until you hear about Jim Morrison, the Lizard King, who vanished into legend in Paris. He was the Lizard King, the poetic prophet of the Doors, a man who turned rock concerts into dark rituals of rebellion. Jim Morrison wasn't just a singer, he was a force of nature, challenging authority with lyrics that blended mysticism, philosophy, and raw sexuality. To millions, he seemed untouchable, a visionary who could bend the crowd with a single verse. But behind his leather-clad persona was a man spiraling deeper into chaos. By the early 1,970 seconds, Morrison was weary of fame. Endless touring court battles over obscenity charges and the crushing expectations of being a countercultural icon pushed him into heavier drinking and erratic behavior. He longed for escape, fleeing to Paris, with hopes of finding peace and rediscovering his art. But on the 3rd of July 1971, he was found dead in a bathtub at just 27 years old. The official cause was listed as heart failure, yet no autopsy was performed, leaving endless speculation and conspiracy theories in his wake. Jim's story is more than a mystery, it's a cautionary tale. It shows us the danger of letting an image consume the person beneath. Morrison became a symbol, but the man inside struggled to carry the weight of that myth. Fame, when coupled with self-destruction, can erase the line between reality and performance. For fans and artists alike, his downfall underscores the importance of grounding, of remembering that artistry thrives, not on chaos alone, but on balance, stability, and care for one's mind. The Lizard King gave us timeless words, but he also left behind a lesson. Legends may seem immortal, yet they are painfully human. But if you thought Morrison's end was mysterious, wait until you meet Sid Vicious, the punk icon, whose rebellion ended in a way no one could ignore. If punk had a face in the late 1970 seconds, it was Sid Vicious. With his spiked hair, snarling attitude, and bass slung low, he embodied everything raw, rebellious, and reckless about the Sex Pistols. Sid wasn't the most skilled musician, but he was the perfect symbol chaos in leather and chains. Crowds loved his defiance, but fame only magnified his self-destruction. Sid's life with Nancy Spungen became a storm of violence, drugs, and tabloid headlines. Their toxic relationship spiraled in public, each scandal fueling the myth of Sid as punk's tragic outlaw. But reality was darker. In October 1978, Nancy was found dead in their hotel room, under circumstances still debated. Sid was arrested, released on bail, and within hours of freedom attended a party. That night he overdosed on heroin and never woke up. He was only 21. His story is shocking, but it also raises an uncomfortable truth. Rebellion without direction can collapse in on itself. Punk was meant to be a voice against conformity, yet for Sid, it became a prison of his own making. The industry cheered on his bad boy persona but offered no lifeline when the performance consumed him. The lesson here is clear. Anger and rebellion can spark change, but when they're not balanced with purpose, they can destroy the very people who carry the torch. Sid Vicious may have symbolized punk's raw power, but his fall reminds us that behind every cultural icon is a human being who needs support, not just spectacle. And if Sid's downfall feels explosive, wait until you hear about Mark Bolan, the glam rock star who met his end in the most sudden and tragic way imaginable. If Sid Vicious was the face of punk's raw rebellion, Mark Bolan was the shimmering crown prince of glam rock. With his glittered cheeks, velvet outfits, and a guitar that purred like a wild animal, Bolan didn't just play music, he created spectacle. As the frontman of T-Rex, he gave the world Get It On, 20th Century Boy, and an entire movement that turned concerts into theatrical rituals of glitter, fashion, and flamboyance. For many young fans in the early 1970 seconds, Bolan wasn't just a star. He was a doorway to freedom, self-expression, and the possibility of being unapologetically different. But the world of glam rock, like every golden era of fame, demanded more than it gave back. Endless tours, interviews, and media expectations pulled Bolan into the same cycle of exhaustion that consumed so many of his peers. Though he largely avoided the substance abuse tragedies of Hendrix or Joplin, Bolan struggled in other ways. Fame was a double-edged sword, fueling his creativity while leaving him vulnerable to excess recklessness and the relentless speed of celebrity life. That speed tragically would become literal. In the early hours of the 16th of September 1977, Mark Bolan was a passenger in a car driven by his girlfriend, Gloria Jones. The vehicle lost control on Barnes Common in London and slammed into a tree. Bolan was killed instantly. He was just 29. His girlfriend survived, though seriously injured. For fans, the news was almost surreal. How could a man so vibrant, so full of life and light be extinguished in an instant? Yet Bolan's death carried a haunting lesson, one that transcended rock and roll. Unlike the overdoses that had claimed other legends, his fate highlighted another reality. Fame often puts people in situations of constant travel, late nights, and rushed decisions. Safety, so easy to overlook in the rush of stardom, can mean the difference between life and death. Bolan's tragedy reminds us that recklessness, even unintentional, can destroy more than just a career. It can end a legacy before it's fully lived. Mark Bolan's story also underscores the fragile line between art and mortality. Glam rock celebrated beauty, sparkle, and youth, but beneath the glitter was a young man as mortal as any of us. He became immortal in song, yes, but his sudden end was a wake-up call for fans. No amount of fame or fashion can shield us from the laws of reality. Even the brightest star must slow down, must take care, must respect life's limits. Today, his influence is undeniable. Artists from David Bowie to modern glam-inspired bands owe him a debt. Yet his loss at 29 is a constant reminder that greatness isn't about how brightly you burn, but how carefully you guard the flame. And if you think Bolan's sudden exit was heartbreaking, wait until you hear about Lynyrd Skynyrd, the Southern rock legends, whose rise was literally cut from the sky in a disaster that shook the world of music to its core. If Mark Bolan's death was sudden and shocking, the tragedy of Lynyrd Skynyrd was apocalyptic. In the 1,970 seconds, they weren't just a band, they were the beating heart of Southern rock. With songs like Sweet Home Alabama and Free Bird, they embodied a sound that was rebellious, proud, and unmistakably American. Their concerts were packed with rowdy energy, their guitars screamed with freedom, and their lyrics became anthems for a generation. But behind the glory was a band constantly on the move. Touring was relentless, with back-to-back shows, and a heavy demand from record labels to keep the hits flowing. The members pushed themselves harder and harder, carrying the weight of expectation from millions of fans. Still, no one could have predicted how brutally fate would intervene. On the 20th of October 1977, Lynyrd Skynyrd boarded a chartered Convair CV-240 to travel between shows. The plane, already notorious for mechanical issues, sputtered mid-flight. With fuel leaking and the engines failing, the pilots attempted an emergency landing in Mississippi. They never made it. The aircraft plowed into a swampy forest, tearing apart trees and metal alike. Lead singer Ronnie Van Zant, guitarist Steve Gaines, backup vocalist Cassie Gaines, and 3 others were killed instantly. The rest of the band and crew were severely injured, many with lifelong scars. The world was stunned. Just 3 days earlier, Skynyrd had released their album Street Survivors, its cover eerily showing the band engulfed in flames. The record was pulled and reissued out of respect, but the coincidence became part of the legend. For fans, the loss was almost unbearable. Southern rock's brightest voice silenced in one catastrophic moment. Yet this story isn't just about tragedy, it's also about responsibility. Investigations revealed that the plane was in poor condition and had been chosen because it was cheaper than safer alternatives. The band members, exhausted and eager to meet commitments, went along with the decision. The lesson is stark when it comes to safety. No amount of fame, money, or deadlines is worth the risk. Cutting corners in pursuit of success can carry devastating consequences. For young musicians today, the crash of Lynyrd Skynyrd remains a sobering reminder. Touring life is grueling, but safety must come before spectacle. Behind every concert ticket is a human life, and no performance is worth gambling with survival. Despite the loss, Lynyrd Skynyrd's music endures. Free Bird has become not just a rock classic, but a tribute to those who lived too fast and died too young. Ronnie Van Zant and Steve Gaines may have left this world in fire and chaos, but their voices still rise each time those chords ring out. And if you thought the fall of Skynyrd was devastating, wait until you hear about Bon Scott, the fiery frontman of AC divided by DC, whose unstoppable energy couldn't save him from a fate as tragic as his music was legendary. If Lynyrd Skynyrd's tragedy fell from the sky, Bon Scott's came from within. As the frontman of AC divided by DC, he was pure electricity, wild, untamed, and unforgettable. With his raspy scream and devilish grin, Bon gave life to anthems like Highway to Hell and TNT. He wasn't just singing about rebellion, he was living it. Every performance felt like a dangerous ride, and fans adored him for it. But living at that pace had consequences. AC divided by DC's rise in the late 1970 seconds was meteoric, with endless tours across continents. The band pushed themselves night after night, feeding off the chaos of their crowds. Bon Iver, the party animal, became infamous for his drinking. Friends described him as charming but unpredictable, one moment laughing with boundless energy, the next stumbling under the weight of his own excess. His lifestyle became part of the band's image, but behind the legend was a body taking the punishment. On the night of the 18th of February 1980, after a heavy night of drinking in London, Bon passed out in a car outside a friend's house. By morning, he was gone. The coroner's report listed acute alcohol poisoning and death by misadventure. He was just 33. For AC divided by DC, the loss was devastating. Their beloved frontman, the very voice of their rebellion, was silenced in an instant. And yet the band stood at a crossroads. They had just released Highway to Hell, their biggest record to date. Many thought the tragedy would end their story, but out of grief came resilience. AC divided by DC brought in Brian Johnson and just months later released Back in Black, an album dedicated to Bon. It went on to become one of the best-selling albums of all time. Bon's story offers more than just heartbreak. It's a lesson about limits. Charisma and talent can carry an artist far, but the human body has boundaries that cannot be ignored. His death is a reminder that celebration should never slip into self-destruction. For fans, his wild spirit remains a thrill, but his loss is a warning carved into rock history. Even the strongest voices can be silenced by neglect. Educationally, his story speaks to young dreamers about balance. Rock and roll will always carry risk, but sustainability requires moderation, awareness, and care. Fame may celebrate the image of endless partying, but real longevity in music comes from protecting both body and mind. Bon Scott left the world with a fire that still burns through AC, divided by DC's music. Each time Highway to Hell blares from speakers, his spirit roars back to life. Yet his fate reminds us, energy without restraint is a candle that burns too brightly, too fast. And if Bon Scott's fall feels tragic, wait until you meet John Bonham, the thunder of Led Zeppelin, whose death didn't just end a life but brought down an entire empire of rock. If Bon Scott was the voice of rebellion, John Bonham was its heartbeat. Known simply as Bonzo, he was the powerhouse drummer of Led Zeppelin, the man who could make drums sound like earthquakes and thunder rolled into one. With his explosive style, he transformed percussion into a lead instrument. Fans still talk about his legendary solos like Moby Dick, where he pounded for 20 minutes straight sometimes, even with his bare hands. He was quite simply irreplaceable, but with great talent came crushing pressure. Led Zeppelin dominated the 1,970 seconds, filling stadiums worldwide and living the excesses that came with superstardom. Their tours became infamous for their extravagance. Hotel floors turned into party zones, wild antics, and never-ending bottles of alcohol. And while the myth of the rock god seemed indestructible, Bonham's body could only take so much. He developed a reputation for heavy drinking, a habit that grew more dangerous as the band's success soared. On the 24th of September 1980, during rehearsals for an upcoming U.S. tour, Bonham started the day with breakfast and tragically alcohol. Over the course of the day, he consumed an estimated 40 shots of vodka. That night, he went to bed and never woke up. The official cause of death was asphyxiation from vomit after acute alcohol intake. He was only 32. The loss was catastrophic not only for his family and fans, but for Led Zeppelin itself. Within weeks, the band announced they could not continue without him. To them, Led Zeppelin was not just about songs or fame. It was about chemistry. And without Bonham's thunder, the storm was over. His death effectively ended one of the greatest rock bands in history. Yet Bonham's story is more than tragedy. It is a lesson in human fragility. The myth of invincible rock stars glamorized a lifestyle of indulgence, but Bonham's passing stripped away that illusion. Even legends are vulnerable when health and moderation are ignored. His downfall teaches us that talent must be nurtured with care, not drowned in excess. For young musicians, Bonham's legacy is twofold. His drumming remains unmatched, a masterclass in passion and precision. But his fate stands as a warning against romanticizing self-destruction. Longevity in art requires balance, respect for the body, and the humility to step away from dangerous habits. John Bonham left behind a thunder that still echoes. Every time a drummer smashes a kit with raw power, they are chasing his ghost. His greatness will always inspire, but his loss is a reminder that even the strongest rhythm can be silenced in an instant. And if Bonham's death shook the foundations of rock, wait until you hear about Keith Moon, the mad genius of The Who, whose tragic end revealed the cruel irony of trying to cure chaos with chaos itself. If John Bonham was thunder, Keith Moon was lightning. The drummer of The Who earned the nickname Moon the Loon for good reason. He was unpredictable, explosive, and lived as though every day was his last. On stage, his drumming was chaos, turned into art-wild fills, furious rolls, and an energy that pushed The Who into legendary status. Off-stage, his antics were just as famous, blowing up toilets, crashing cars into hotel pools, and turning destruction into performance. For fans, Moon was a rock star in the purest sense. For those who knew him, he was also a ticking time bomb. Moon's lifestyle, fueled by alcohol and reckless excess, masked a darker truth. He struggled with anxiety and the pressure of keeping up his wildman image. By the mid-1,970 seconds, his health was visibly deteriorating. His drumming, once unstoppable, began to falter under the weight of constant abuse. The Who loved him, but they could not save him from himself. In 1978, desperate to fight his dependence on alcohol, Moon was prescribed clomethiazole heminevrin, a sedative meant to help him withdraw safely. But the irony was brutal. On the 7th of September, after attending a party in London, Moon went home, took the medication, and never woke up. The official cause of death was an overdose of the very drug intended to cure him. He was just 32. The lesson here is, sobering treatment must be managed with care, and quick fixes can sometimes be just as dangerous as the problem they aim to solve. Moon's tragedy highlights the need for proper medical supervision, awareness, and compassion when dealing with addiction. It's a reminder that even the loudest, boldest personalities can be hiding pain that requires understanding, not spectacle. For musicians and fans alike, Moon's story warns against glorifying the rock and roll lifestyle. Behind the laughter, the chaos, and the outrageous headlines was a man desperately trying to cope. His drumming still inspires generations, but his loss underscores the importance of addressing mental health and substance use with honesty and support. Keith Moon will forever be remembered as a genius behind the drum kit, a whirlwind of sound and personality. But his fate is proof that no amount of talent can outrun the consequences of excess. And if Keith Moon's end felt cruelly ironic, then Hasson is truly heartbreaking. The king himself, Elvis Presley, whose fall from grace revealed how fame, pressure, and hidden pain can bring down even the mightiest of legends. He wasn't just a star, he was the king. Elvis Presley, the boy from Tupelo who became a cultural earthquake, changed music forever. With his voice, his moves, and his charisma, he ignited the birth of rock and roll. By the 1,970 seconds, he was more than an artist. He was a global symbol, a man who filled arenas and dominated Las Vegas residencies. To the outside world, Elvis had everything: fame, fortune, and immortality through song. But behind the rhinestone jumpsuits and dazzling smiles, the king was collapsing. The pressure was relentless. Vegas demanded night after night of marathon shows. Hollywood expected films. Fans expected perfection. Elvis, a man who once thrived on youthful energy, now carried the weight of an empire. To cope, he relied increasingly on prescription drugs, pills, for sleep, for energy, for pain. They were legal, supplied by doctors, but the effect was no less dangerous. His health declined, weight gain, exhaustion, and mood swings became visible signs of a man unraveling. On the 16th of August, 1977, Elvis was found unconscious in the bathroom of Graceland. Attempts to revive him failed. He was only 42. The official cause of death was heart failure with drug dependency, a contributing factor. For millions of fans, the news was unthinkable. The king of rock and roll gone far too soon. Yet Elvis's story is more than a tragedy, it's a lesson. It shows us how fame, when coupled with isolation and pressure, can destroy even the strongest icons. It also raises important questions about healthcare and accountability. His reliance on prescription drugs reveals how easy it is to mistake doctor-approved for safe. Elvis's downfall reminds us that mental and physical health must be prioritized no matter how bright the spotlight shines. Educationally, his legacy highlights the importance of balance. Stardom may seem glamorous, but no career is worth sacrificing health and humanity. For artists and fans alike, Elvis's fate is a wake-up call. Even the greatest legends are vulnerable when they don't take care of themselves. And yet Elvis Presley's music endures. Can't Help Falling in Love, Suspicious Minds, Hound Dog, these songs still echo across generations. His story remains both inspirational and heartbreaking, proof that one man can change the world with music, but also proof that no one is invincible. Elvis is Hasson not only because of who he was, but because of what his downfall teaches us. Behind the crown and the glory was a man fragile and human whose struggles remind us that fame without balance is a dangerous trap. These stories remind us that the golden glow of fame often hides shadows. Which of these rock stars' downfalls shocked you the most? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from the dark side of music history. From Jimi Hendrix's haunting guitar cries to Elvis Presley's final days in Graceland, these stories reveal the hidden cost of fame. The 1,970 seconds gave us some of the most powerful music ever recorded, but it also showed us how pressure, excess, and the relentless demands of the spotlight can break even the brightest stars. Each of these legends, whether taken by addiction, exhaustion, or sheer circumstance, reminds us that talent alone is not enough. Behind the lights and applause are real people who need rest, balance, and compassion. Their downfalls are not just scandals to retell, but lessons to carry forward. Health must always come before glory. So which story struck you the hardest? Was it the mystery of Jim Morrison, the sudden silence of Lynyrd Skynyrd, or the heartbreaking fall of the king himself? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if you found value in uncovering the untold truths behind rock's greatest names, consider subscribing. There are more stories waiting, and each one has something to teach us about fame, humanity, and the fragile line between legend and loss.